Welcome to episode 3 of Sawdust Nation with Josh from North Country Woodworking and myself, AJ from Crafted in New Jersey. Today we'll be talking about our favorite tools in the shop and some shop layout. As we always start, Josh, what's on your bench?
What's on my bench? I haven't been out in the workshop as much as I want to, but I have some old projects I'm finishing up and hammers I talked about last week. The walnut I'm going to use is actually beautiful. I started cutting into it and getting things laid out a little bit. And that grain and everything on that is just gorgeous.
Yeah, I saw that's a pretty thick piece of wood that you're going to be using for that.
It is, and actually bought a new blade for my bandsaw to help with resawing it. It's a 3/4 Timberwolf. I think it's a 3 TPI. And I did some test cuts on some white walnut, and it was like butter. It just cut right through it, no problem.
The Timberwolves, sometimes get a little bad rap, around the woodworking community. Because I was looking for a bandsaw blade to do some resawing. Read good things about the Timberwolf, but some people like them, some people don't, and I'm glad to hear that you're using them with no problems. So.
Yeah, I've been using them since my last bandsaw, and I honestly don't have any issues with them whatsoever. It's been working quite nice, so I suggest them. If you haven't tried them, they're not crazy expensive. I've had no issues with them. I've had at least 4 blades from them.
Yeah, I got one sitting in the garage that I keep saying I'm going to throw on, and that just still sits in the corner waiting to get thrown on and tried out. Because I just keep saying, I'm going to do it, and never get to it. It sounds like a good project that's coming up. Like I said, I can't wait to see them. I'm really curious on how you're going to transform that chunk of walnut into the hammers. I'm really excited to see that.
Well, they're going to be massive, and actually I've been thinking about adding some pellets inside to make it heavier.
Oh, wow. It's already going to be heavy enough.
Oh, I understand that, but I want this thing to be a special gift. They're going to be using it to motivate some people, and I want it to be something that, in order to motivate, they're going to have to do a little bit of a workout for.
I was going to say, is it going to be a used tool, or is it going to be something that's going to be mounted on the wall, as a decoration? But now hearing that it's going to have possible pellets inside, I think they're going to be using it.
Well, I don't think they're going to be using it like you would a mallet in the workshop, hopefully.
Oh, come on. I mean, that would be kind of funny to see. Putting a little 1/8-inch peg in.
Oh, bam! One hit.
You might break the peg and send it to the next state, but it'll go through.
One hit wonder, man. One hit wonder.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that sounds like some good upcoming projects.
What do you got in your bench? What's going on?
I have my first Etsy order that I'm slacking hardcore on. It's a guitar stand that I've previously made for my my father-in-law. He loved it, and I posted it up a while back on Etsy and got my first order. So I was trying to figure out a way that I could use a templating bit for the router, and my template is a little bit messed up, so if I use that template, I'm going to screw up the piece. So I'm going through a whole different thing. I might just have to trim it up with the bandsaw and then sand it, make sure it's all right, It's going to be fine for the person who's buying it, but you know how we are. We critique everything that we make, so I'm going to see every little flaw.
We have to, man. And you know what? I didn't say it before. I'm going to say it now. Congrats on that sale. That's awesome. There's some people that have had Etsy for a long time and haven't made one single sale.
Man, it was an exciting moment. I see, because I keep getting notifications of messages and whatnot, and then next thing I know, I'm like, a new message came through, and I see it says, congratulations on your first sale. I'm like, hey, that was a proud moment seeing that thing come through. But so I got the guitar stand I'm working on. Of course, more flags, that's my forte as we speak, but got wavy flags, got that challenge coin rack that is in the works. Tonight, I just laid down some more stars on flags, and man, they're a pain on those wavy flags because each one is done by hand. I stencil it out, and then next thing you know, I'm there with a little paintbrush.
I mean, I couldn't tell. I mean, honestly, it looks like you did something from the CNC.
I tried my best, Of course, I could tell which ones are a little bit bigger and which ones are a little bit smaller. But, they're coming out.
You're going to, because you're the one that actually did it yourself.
Of course. So, and then the last thing I got that I'm slacking on, of course, is another. I got to make a small box with a hinged lid for spent ammo. Guy who's buying it, he's real big into shooting. Hit me up. He's like, "Hey, can you make this little box?" He showed me a picture of it, and it's very simple. But of course, I don't want to make something just simple. I want to make it at least, some craftsmanship in it instead of just slapping some pieces of wood together and then go, here's your box. And I want them to really know, I put some time and effort into it. So I'm putting up different ways that I want to kind of build it. Nothing crazy. I did find a little video online that's going to help me out by making this, and hopefully that'll come out good. Just got to get working on it.
Yeah, that's my thing. Every time I go in the shop, something comes up. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. I went into the shop, I was ready to work, and then something came up, and I couldn't do anything. And it's been a very busy couple of weeks, but we're going to start knocking out some projects when I can. I have some laser engraving projects as well, and, those hammer products. Excuse me. Don't want to say mallet.
It's going to be one big mallet.
But, yeah, it's been a crazy couple of weeks.
It's crazy because I'm still working, so of course I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning, and then coming home at 6 o'clock, 6:30, and at night. And next thing I know, I'm back in the shop trying to get as much knocked out as possible. And then my weekends are packed with stuff around the house, and still trying to get myself further ahead than I am now. But it's coming along. I love this. I love doing it. Even though I'm tired all the time, it's fun.
Well, you like keeping busy. And, there's people out there that like to relax, and there's people that just like tinkering. They like to keep busy. When they're the most relaxed is when they're actually doing something. Doesn't have to be, crazy, it just needs to be something, to work the mind, the hands, and maybe create something.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I forgot. You said about the laser engraver, and I actually got to get onto the CNC and get a woman who bought a couple things from me already actually messaged me and said that they want an Oilers logo CNC, like I did the police badge, just carved out, burnt, and, something simple, but I keep forgetting about it because I don't have it written down anywhere. I usually write down all my projects, and that's the only one that I kind of went, I'll write it down tomorrow, and never did. So I got to get on that.
Do you have like a special notebook that you write it down, or a computer program?
The problem with me is, and I've had this issue throughout anything that I've done, if I put it in a book and then close the book, I forget about it. So I have to have it in front of me somewhere. So either on sticky notes or, I have actually on my door from the garage into the basement, I got a whiteboard that I put on there. And so I'm writing down all the orders on there. And then, as they're getting completed, then I'm wiping them away. It's nice because before I was trying to keep it all in my head, or on a message and like take a screenshot, but then I'd forget where I kept it. It was a mess trying to remember what projects. I'd be going, I only have like 2 more flags to do, and I'm like, oh my God, I have 4 flags to do, and I don't even remember half of them. What are they supposed to be? So finally, I had a whiteboard sitting in the corner. I screwed it right to the door, and man, that thing's changed so much. That was one of my biggest organization things that I could have done for my shop, because that was, that's a big thing. I mean, I'm not just doing it for family. I'm doing it for, customers, and I want to make them as happy as they can. Being late on a project isn't going to make anybody happy. The whiteboard definitely helps. I don't know about yourself. I think I saw a whiteboard in your shop. I'm not sure.
I have a whiteboard. I think it's behind my deep freezer. Not being used.
Good spot.
Yeah, I do have a notebook that I tend to write my shop notes in. But I use Excel to actually write down all my info. My wife is really good at reminding me what needs to be done in what order. Thankfully for her, because I'll be in there and be like, hey, this is like the last project I have to do. It means I could do some shop projects. And she'll come out and be like, hey, have you done this? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm working on that right now.
Yeah. Can't tell her you forgot about it.
Nope. So, yeah, she helps me and keep on track with a little organization from Excel.
I tried Excel, and like I said, same thing. When I close that laptop or shut the computer down, I'm like, well, I don't remember half the stuff. So now, and I like to be able to look over and see it instead of having to go to my computer, open it up, or even a notebook. It sounds not so tedious, but to me, opening the book, thumbing through the pages, I'd rather just see it right there and know, okay, I got this flag, this one, and here's how they're supposed to be.
Well, everyone has their own way of organizing. I mean, like, something that works for me might not work for you. And honestly, the Excel is a great way to keep track. But like I said, I am not the one that usually has to input and remind myself. It's my wife backs me up on that. So she's a big help when it comes to that. If I was by myself, I would definitely have to revamp the way I did it and maybe, try the whiteboard approach. But I really don't have the shop room for it right now. My walls are pretty much full.
The reason I put it on the door is because I have to go in and out of that all the time. So it's right in front of my face, and I can't miss it.
Line of sight, man. Line of sight.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because if I had it behind that deep freezer, I would forget about it all the time and probably never use it.
It is kind of hard to see.
And you forget to write something down because now you're like, I gotta go dig it out. I really don't feel like it. I'll kind of remember it.
Yeah, I'd probably eventually hang up once I kind of reorganize the shop a little bit. But, organization and all these different projects popping up. What do you find is your favorite tool? Like 3 or 4 favorite tools that you would have to use and everything else could be thrown out?
That's a tough one. I mean, throughout this whole time, my shop has changed and, tools have been bought and sold and whatnot. But if I had to narrow it down I'm going to narrow it down to 3. And this is in no particular order, but I'd start out with my Wen track saw. I really like it. I never had a track saw before this. I always saw people, having the Makitas, the Festools. Actually, the Festool was the first one I saw, and I was like, wow, that's a really neat idea. Now I can cut a straight line without having to put it on a table saw. And it's a lot safer to use a track saw than trying to rip down a 4x8 sheet of plywood on your table saw alone. And I have done it, and it's not so much fun. And I did it on a contractor saw, let alone by myself. So the Wen track saw was, they had 2 different versions of it. One actually had a riving knife. I know you and I had talked at one point about it because I was asking you about your Makita track saw, if it had a riving knife. The Wen doesn't. It has a little anti-kickback pawl. I'm finally getting used to it, so I can use it a little bit better. Second on my list would be one of my newest additions, which would be the Bosch miter saw. It's their glide version with that articulating arm in the back. I have to say, I put it on a cart that I made, and I dialed it in. Took no time to dial in, and man, that thing, I could see where I was messing up with the old miter saw. This thing's, accurate, real accurate. The next would be my table saw. That is the rigid. It's like the half cabinet saw, I would call it.
Yeah, it's like just in between there.
Yeah, it's between a contractor and a full cabinet. Yeah. I have to say, the only thing that I don't like about it is I wish the T-fence was a little bit different and more rugged, if you want to say, because the only thing that I have an issue with is sometimes it wobbles a little bit, so I got to really make sure my cuts are my measurements are correct. And then the dust collection on that is great, but it could be improved with some duct tape because there's a lot of air gaps around the whole thing. Actually, I saw another guy use flexible magnet where he put it around all the gaps. He put it where like the angle levers are and the blade raise. It's actually pretty neat. But those are my 3. The track saw, the Bosch miter saw, and the rigid table saw would be my top 3 that I wouldn't be able to live without. How about yourself?
Those are pretty good top 3s. Let's see. I would have to go with my bandsaw. I love taking rough lumber and resawing it down and getting exactly what I need so I can, create anything. It's actually saved me time, money, and in the long run, it's paid for itself, I believe. The second would have to be, well,
you tell yourself that to make it better.
Well, it has. The amount of time I've spent on my old one trying to get it, perfected, to this one, I literally, I changed the blade out. It took me 5 minutes to set it up, and I was already doing straight lines.
Yeah, no, that's a time saver, big time.
Time is money, friend.
Oh, yeah.
The second would be my track saw as well. Before I was having to have the big box stores cut it down to close, about an inch away from what I wanted so they didn't mess it up. Finish up the cutting in the shop with my DeWalt table saw, and it was a pain. I was staying away from some sheet goods because of it. Now, I was tied to the top of my car, and I bring it home, land it in the driveway, and I go at it because it takes a couple minutes for me to do what I need to. It's accurate. It cuts great and a great addition to the shop.
With the Makita, how long was the track that came with it? Because I found something out about my Wen that for some reason I didn't even know.
The kit that I got, because it came with a track, was a 55-inch.
Okay. For some reason, Wen decided that when they sold you the track saw, they're gonna also sell you a track that is, I think, like 7 foot or seven and like a couple inches. And I'm like, I laid it down on an 8 foot piece of MDF the other day, and I'm like, wait, I thought this was an 8 foot track. I'm like, I've been lied to this whole time. So now I had to go out and buy another track so that I can, because I know it happened to me already. I had to move the track a little bit, and now my cuts aren't perfect.
Yeah.
So I bought another track and made that 8 foot. But I was so baffled. I laid it down and I'm going, why isn't it to the edge? And I thought maybe the MDF was larger than 8 foot, but I'm going, the big box store is not going to sell an 8.5 foot piece of MDF. Yeah. It's going to be 8 foot.
Or
so,
less.
Yeah, the track was a little short.
Marked as 8
Yeah,
foot
right?
or less. Yeah, I mean, they came with the 55. I got an extra track just in case I needed to break down larger goods. Mm-hmm. But in truth, I have only used the one track so far. I've been kind of saving the other track and not alternating them because, why use it when it's not needed? But there'll become a day where, breaking down some 8 foot sections or something, and I'll take that out.
The one thing that I didn't like was, not that any flaw to Wen or any of it, is that because my shop is narrow, I can't use the whole track. Like if I wanted to cut the like a little 2 foot section off, now I got to break the track down. It's not really a big pain, but it became more of a nuisance because now I have to take the set screws out. Now I have to pull it apart, set the other one down, and make sure it doesn't fall and then get damaged. And then, that's why I bought another little section. I think it was a 50-inch or something like that. I'm like, that's perfect. I could cut a 4-foot pieces off of the MDF and it'll be fine. And it worked out great. So I'll keep one for 8 foot and then one for smaller sections, so I don't have to keep breaking it down.
I would like to revisit the tracks and probably purchase a smaller version for the Makita. I think they sell them in like 30-inch or something close to that. Mm-hmm. Because, there's a couple times where I found myself using the track saw for a smaller project. To straighten out an edge or create some lines for some coins or whatever. And, and I'm using, a 55-inch, track for this piece that's like 25 inches.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely would come in handy in certain projects for sure.
The one thing that I was trying to find another brand that maybe had one, but did you ever see the Festool that has the track attached to the saw? And it's spring loaded, so you put it up to the edge of the wood, and it's meant really for 2x6s, 2x8s. Instead of using a speed square in your circular saw, this has, I guess, a speed square kind of built into the very edge, and it lays up against. You run your track over it, and then after you're done, you see the track retract, and it's all built into literally one unit.
Oh, wow!
So you don't have. Yeah, it's, if you haven't seen it, you have to look. I don't know the model number or anything like that, but I know Festool has it.
I'm going to have to take a look. I don't think I've seen that. I've done a lot of research for track saws, and that is one I have not seen. I've seen the woodpecker additions that you can get to, straight edges and stuff like that. Yeah, would it be nice? Of course it would be, but not needed.
Yeah, actually, I had a very real quick story about my track saw. My very first miter saw cart. I laid it all out on the plywood, had plans, and I followed the plans to the T. Well, the only thing I didn't do was, I don't know how I can explain this. So you have your 4 foot wide piece of plywood, and I needed to mark 2 foot from one edge and then cut it. Well, I put the track on the opposite side of the line, so my 1/8 inch went into the 2 foot piece that I needed to cut. And I'm going, why is this thing short? And I'm going I was racking my brain going, I can't believe that I messed up an 1/8 inch. And I'm going, this track saw is not worth it. And then I talked to a gentleman on Instagram, and he had the same exact track saw. I go, hey, I have to ask you something. And when he explained it, he goes, look, I'm going to try explaining this the easiest way. He goes, you might want to put the blade on the outside of the cut, not on the inside. I was like, wow, I didn't even think of that. So now every time I use that track saw, I always laugh because I'm like, I can't believe that was simple thing I completely missed. But I remember it on a miter saw. I remember it on the table saw. But since this was so new to me, I had no idea. And now the whole project I had to scrap because I screwed it up.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning lesson. I think I did the same thing my first practice cut with it. I didn't take the measurement and I didn't put it on the right side. So I knew instantly when it was done. It's off by just the same amount as the blade. What? Huh? Yeah, I got it.
You find out quick, let me tell you.
Yeah, luckily it was just, breaking down some sheet goods and it was on my first cut. I ensured I measured everything, 3-4 times, measured after. And then once I figured out that, it was pretty much good the rest of the time.
Now, if you didn't have a track saw, you can also do it, with the circular saw. So you don't necessarily, I could have easily just said, I don't want a track saw. And because I still have it, a Milwaukee, the first generation of the cordless circular saws. And it works great.
Oh, you're fancy, cordless.
Oh, yeah. I had it I think I got it from work, or I bought it for work and then was like, I'm never using it here. I'm a mechanic, so what the hell am I using a circular saw for? So I brought it home, and I was doing it in the beginning where I'd put a straight edge down, measure. Then I forgot you had to also add the very edge of the straight edge.
Yeah.
So like where the foot is of the circular saw. So now I had to do more measurements and all this, and finally I just said, I got to get a track saw. But you still can, and a lot of people do it. I see a lot of people doing live edge slabs like that. They put the straight edge and then clamp it down, run their circular saw, and it's a perfectly straight edge. So there's other ways to get around that stuff.
100%. Before I got the track saw, what I did is took some MDF and basically made my own style track. I could lay it on the line and basically get that same cut. But, you run into limitations with that. It's hard to clamp down. It's not as easy as just laying it down. You move one side, the other side, there's nothing on the bottom to cause it to basically stick there like on a track saw. They had the little, not rubber, but like foam, I guess, on the bottom. And
yeah,
it worked. It did its job when I needed it to. But, I was doing enough where, warranted a track saw. Now I have that. I have the old piece of MDF that I used to use just sitting there staring at me. I have also used those same tracks for a straight edge for my router.
I've seen that used before, and I thought that was a pretty neat idea.
I just flipped it around so the higher end. I think my router, by memory, I think it's like 2 inches or 2.5. I have a piece of block essentially. The track, I line it up and I take that block and it lines right up to the line. Then it's a perfect dead center cut for me every time.
Yeah, that's really good. I've seen it done. I always thought, I'm going to use that one day, and then I never do. It's always on the back of my head, but I don't use my router enough. But I did see you using that. I think you used it for, didn't you do your match fit by Microjig, the tabletop?
Yeah, the bench that I made, that's exactly how I made it. Was I had to figure out a system where I didn't have to, repeat measurements each time. So what I did is I used some of my woodpecker tools to do the layout. Figured out that little 2-inch block, and I was able to basically put the block down, butt up the track against it, clamp it down, and I was good to go.
Yeah, no, it definitely worked out, and that tabletop does look nice, and its function out is amazing by those Microjig dovetail clamps. I keep thinking of how I can utilize them in my area, but I just haven't gotten to it.
Once you have made the tracks, you'll start utilizing them for things you never thought you were going to. I didn't plan on doing as much dovetail tracks in my shop until I made the first one. And I realized that I can make one board for my table saw and I can turn that into multiple jigs alone.
I have a joiner jig for my table saw, but it's only meant for 2x4s, and that's it. So if I put something else on it that's a little wider, it's not going to be as stable. So I was thinking about a match fit, have a piece that I just put the dovetails in, and then I can have a couple clamps on it. And so I could put any size board that I want, up to a certain point. So if I make it 12 inches wide, I could technically put an 11-inch wide, maybe even, actually you could put a 12-inch because you can hang it over. So, and then you can use that instead of, breaking out the joiner. I love using the joining jig that I made. That was the actually first jig I've ever made, and it was the greatest thing. It's not 100%, but it works.
Yeah, I have a joiner too, and for live edges and stuff, you can't just throw it on the joiner. You have to make that a straight edge first. So, I use my joiner jig for my table saw with a match fit system, and when I have 2x4s, any kind of stock lumber like that, I have a mark on there where I line up, and it's, it takes just enough off. I forget the measurement, but it takes that rounded edge off, and I can go from there.
That's what I was thinking about doing that and putting those. I know I've seen them on Amazon. It's this nuts, the stick-on tape with the measurements.
Yeah.
Then I can at least put maybe a board up against it, clamp that down, and then use other clamps to clamp the stock down. I want to make sure I'm right on. Instead of putting a 2x4 down, my luck, I'd put it so crooked that I wouldn't notice it right away.
Okay.
And then I'd have like a little pencil point at the very end.
On my meter saw station, that's what I use. I use like the metal ruling stick-on stuff, and it works great. I mean, like, honestly, I'd use it again for another jig. Probably going to do another table saw jig here in the future when I get some downtime. Maybe incorporate some of that dovetail system from Microjig.
Now, speaking of tools, we went over the three.
I still got one to name off.
Oh, I thought you went over three. Track saw, table saw,
Nope.
and bandsaw.
I said bandsaw.
Oh, you're doing four.
I did bandsaw and I did track saw. We kind of mentioned the table saw in there a little bit. And I do like my table saw, don't get me wrong. But there's not enough space before the blade. So for like any of my jigs, I have to kind of like hold them up. And then, So it's a contractor saw. It's not meant for some of the woodworking we're doing. But my last tool would have to be, especially since I have my track saw, would have to be a router. I use my router almost in every job. It comes into play somehow, either to round over edges or do something. I don't know what I would do without it, to be honest with you. Like, that thing comes in handy. I have two. And I use my Bosch Colt, I think it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
is it the little palm?
It's the palm one, but it's the 1.5 horsepower or whatever.
Yeah, I think I got the same one.
It's the thing can like it goes. Like I did my tabletop with that matchfoot system, and it did the entire thing. Mm-hmm. Like I mean,
that thing's powerful.
It is. Yeah, I would have to say those are my top three: bandsaw, track saw, and then my palm sander, or not palm sander, my palm router. There we go. Words could be hard.
I'm constantly looking because I love the Bosch trim router. That's what it was called. I couldn't think of that name before. I keep looking at the Milwaukee because I have Milwaukee platform at work. I got it at home, and I was looking at the cordless one because it's not so much a pain to have the cord, but I always plug it in somehow behind me, and then it's always in my way. I'm like, maybe I could break away from the cord, but I love how much power that Bosch has. That thing, it almost feels like a bigger router.
Oh, yeah.
In a little compact size.
Really glad that I picked that one up because it was between that one and the DeWalt, and I was really leaning toward the DeWalt. Like I had it in my hand, then I saw the Bosch, and I'm like, sat there on Lowe's. I had the guy come around, like a couple times. Hey man, do you need help? I'm like, nope. I'm trying to just make this decision, and I forget what swayed me to the Bosch, but I'm glad I went with it. In fact, I would actually like to get a was it 2.25 or 3? They have in the Bosch. Mm-hmm. I like to get a bigger router on that side because I have a Craftsman. It's the same Craftsman that I got in the very beginning, and I use that for my table. And then, for bigger jobs that I need to take it out for, I want to install that in the table and not have to take it out ever, and then have another big, router ready to go when I need it.
Yeah, I was lucky enough because I was looking at what was it? A Porter cable with a fixed base and then also a plunge base. And I was looking all over Facebook Marketplace forum, and I kept on saying, like, I need a router. And this was before I even had the Bosch, and I stumbled upon one that somebody was selling locally. I mean, the thing's brand new. The only thing I had to change was where the cord comes out of the motor. It sat so long in the case that it actually dry rotted, bent.
No kidding.
So I had to get a new boot for it, like the wire strain. Relief. So that's the only issue with it. The plunge base works great. The fixed base works great. I mean, it's got enough power to power through anything, but I barely use it because, of course, with the stuff that I'm doing, routers, the only thing that I need to route sometimes is with the trim router. I use keyholes. So I do a little keyhole jig and use that little trim router instead of breaking out the big one. But yeah, I got a Porter cable. I got a Ryobi tabletop router station. I barely use that thing, but that will get used probably tomorrow night with that challenge coin rack and that nice Diablo bit that I found, that 3/16 router bit for the coins.
I really want to know how that works out for you. You should probably do a story so I can watch it.
Yeah, I don't know how well I can film and route on the table with it.
That's really not my concern, sir. Just make sure you don't take off a finger or anything. That's all I ask.
I do have a tripod, so I think maybe I could set that up. But trying to press the play button and then run over and then try route in a straight line.
Well, what kind of phone do you got?
An Android.
All you have to say is, "Hey, Google," and it pops up, and you can say, "Go ahead, push play, record, whatever," and you don't have to even touch it.
Wow, look at that. I learned something new. I don't know anything about my phone. I just know it can make phone calls and go on Instagram, and that's kind of it.
Fair enough.
So,
okay, so
yeah,
we're a little bit off topic on that one.
yeah. So now, speaking of tools real quick, what's one that you wish that you could have in your shop that you don't currently?
There's a long list of tools like that.
Well, you got to narrow it down to one.
At this moment, drum sander is kind of up there because of all the sanding I've had to do in the recent past. And a drum sander would allow me to get through that a lot quicker and not have, the shakes for a couple of days after.
Yeah, that drum sander, it definitely changes the way you sand, and it helps out big time. If you can find them used, they're still even a good deal. I keep looking for you.
I appreciate it. My problem is I don't really need it, and I really don't have that much room left in the shop to put it. So if I found one, have to, change up my shop flow, that's a whole different conversation, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
So what's the one tool that you really want in your shop? Do not worry about price. It's just something that if you could get reasonable, like we don't need, something crazy like a 20-inch joiner.
Well, I mean, the only thing that I would really like is, I mean, this is just literally the first thing that popped into my head. My joiner has no dust collection whatsoever, so I would love a joiner just with dust collection. I mean, that would be fantastic, but, this one I got to make a box so it can kind of suck up the shavings.
What joiner do you have?
It's an old Craftsman 12 and a quarter or 12 and an eighth. I mean, the thing's old. It's all cast iron. It almost looks like the old Deltas.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But this one, it has, real thin steel base to it, and literally the shavings just go all over the place. I mean, most of it stays down where the cart, because I made a little cart for it, so it kind of stays there, but the majority goes all over the place. So I got to encase it with some wood and then put a dust port on it, so maybe I could create a negative vacuum.
Having that dust collection for any of those big tools like the joiner definitely helps, because like before I was using my shop vac for my joiner, and it's like a 4-inch port. I'm trying to shove my hose up in there, I guess shavings as I can, and when I got my new dust collection, I hooked it up and it took more out. So I mean, like, it's nice to have.
I think that would be really the only kind of, as we sit here right now, the only new tool that I would like to have. And I wish I used my joiner more, but for the things that I do right now, I don't need a joiner. But I just want it just because it has better dust collection.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I definitely would like to start using my joiner a lot more. I'm sure that there's a lot more I can do with it than I have been. That goes with a lot of my newer tools. There are a lot of capabilities to these newer tools. And
oh yeah,
if you use them right and you make the right jigs, you can almost do anything with them.
And you could also even use one tool for multiple things instead of having to buy, that specialty tool. You might be able to use, your bandsaw for a certain thing that you've been eyeing up. But, it kind of all flows into good shop layout, because if you don't have a good shop layout, then you're going to be constantly, instead of making a good flow from one corner to the next, as a workstation, you start here, you start in the next. My shop layout is I start in the center, and then I just figure eight and zigzag and go all over the place. I constantly cross my path like 100 times when I'm downstairs. But it's because of how it's set up and kind of the space I'm limited to. But shop layout definitely plays a big role in getting projects, completed on time and in an efficient time. Because if you're constantly going back and forth, you could be missing steps or doing something twice that you really didn't even need to.
Even, stepping over tools and cords or things that's what I run into, because I have a pretty small shop. If you've seen it before, it's basically almost like a U. I have most of my bigger tools able to be rolled out and used when they need them and put back. I can start in one end of the shop and kind of work my way around, and I set it up for that, that purpose. So if you're facing the garage door and in the back of my shop, you have my dust collection in wood, basically where that hangs out, my hardwood, the softwood. Then you have my jointer, and then usually a workbench, either my one with my planer and table saw, or the actual match foot system workbench that has my sanding and my router table. And then you have my bandsaw. And then as you go around, I have my miter saw, another workbench, my drill press, and then another workbench I can utilize. I could start with that wood and just work my way around and get to the point where I'm at a workbench and working it the last couple stages.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
it's a nice layout. It does need to be changed up a little bit to give myself some more room. Because my meter saw station, if I have a long piece of stock in there, it runs underneath my drill press. And there's some disadvantages to how I have it set up, but for the amount of space I have, I think I'm utilizing it correctly.
Oh, that's really good. I mean, I wish, since I started this, I wish I could have a nice miter saw station, where I can put stop blocks and whatnot, but I don't have enough space for it. I know everything that you have, or most of it, is on wheels, so you can get it out of the way if need be. I had to with mine. I mean, everything I have is on wheels. The only thing that's not is the CNC, but that's tucked away, so I never have to move it. I mean, literally, the table saw, the band saw, the miter saw, the drum sander. The only thing I don't have on a movable table, is the planer. That one I have stored underneath my workbench, so I have to break my back each time I need to use it. So I don't really use it much, but when I do, I keep reminding myself that I need to build a cart for it. So eventually I'll get to it. I keep saying it, but I will.
Making a cart for that would be pretty fun, man. Are you going to make it a flip cart, or are you going to make it so it's just a regular cart?
Probably just a regular one, just to get it eventually. And I'm trying my hardest to maybe do it over this winter. But I really want to make a torsion box outfeed table, but smaller than I have now. Smaller, but still utilize enough space. Because I use my outfeed table as a workbench, a painting bench, a staining bench. I mean, I use it for everything. So I want to make it big enough to still work on, but small enough so then I might be able to squeeze the table saw in a little bit and gain a little bit more room.
Nice, okay,
so
yeah.
I'm not on top of myself.
I actually want to do the same thing. I want to make a torsion box for my my workbench area. The one I have currently is, for lack of better words, not the straightest. It was the first workbench in my shop. Maybe we can do some collaboration on that and help each other out this year.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, workflow is a very important part of the shop process, making sure that you can go from one tool to the other and not have to step over yourself. It's something that you don't figure out overnight. It's something that continuously changes. You get a new tool, guess what? Your flow's going to change.
One thing that really changed my flow for the better was when I added that dust collection. I have a wall-mounted dust collector like you. Once I bought that, I knew immediately I wanted to hard pipe it. So once I was able to, that changed everything because like you said, wires, hoses, tools, what could you trip over? And that was one of my biggest things. I wanted stuff off the ground and away. So I was fortunate enough that I was able to, hard pipe it. Not everything is off the ground. I mean, I only have 7-foot ceiling, so it's, only a foot and change above my head, but still it's off the ground and out of the way so I don't trip and hurt myself like I already did where I thought I broke my ribs falling onto a pile of wood.
See, you actually had me beat on that. I don't have a hard pipe for my dust collection. I have the Rockler system where it's basically detachable hose. And it's worked great for me. The only problem I have is when I'm utilizing it, I have to be very careful where it is.
It worked out the way I have it because my miter saw and bandsaw don't move from where they are. I kind of move them a foot or two away from the wall, and then they go right back. I mean, I have a small bandsaw, so it's nice. I would love to have the same exact one you have, but for my space, it would take up a lot of space, and I don't use it as much. If I was using it on a daily basis, then I would try to fit it into the shop. Of course, you have to, even if it's as big as the shop. Who cares? If it's a nice new tool, I'll make it fit.
With that, we have questions that we got in. We have 3 questions total, 2 from the same individual, Jim Pulowski, my father, was talking about signing your work and how that kind of shows that you're proud of it and you own it. Going along with that, he also asked if we use any kind of old wood, meaning kind of like barn wood or any kind of like bog wood or anything with, a lot of history or crazy grain because it's been around forever. Personally, I haven't had the opportunity to work with anything like that, but I would definitely like to because it will give history and a lot of
Character.
Yeah, a lot of character to the build itself. I'm hoping that someday someone reaches out and I can actually do that. How about yourself?
I keep looking on Facebook Marketplace for, old antique wood, but I'm afraid of it because of what might lie within it, just nails, screws, stuff like that. So there's a lot of time that gets invested into cleaning it up. But no, I have not used any rustic wood. The most rustic wood I used is pallet wood. So if it stays outside for a few weeks, then it's rustic to me. But
you're right. You had a good point there about nails and you don't know what's in it. And I've actually used newer wood. And we say newer wood, I'm saying it hasn't been barn wood or anything like that. But it still had nails in it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a problem that you have to kind of take on, but definitely something I'd like to get into eventually. Yeah. He also talked about, signing your work. And, I have a brand. I have a laser engraver. That's how I sign my work. Brand everything I can or laser engrave it, depending on the piece. I definitely need to get better about branding because my brands sometimes are wicked awesome. And then other times it looks like I burnt something and you can barely make it out. So I got to sand it down again, try it again. But how about yourself, man? What's your take on that?
Well, I love branding. Once in a while, I'll sign the piece, especially if it's going to something, I signed the police flag that I made. I'll put, if it's just a normal build, nothing, too crazy, then I'll just brand it. But do you do the water trick where you spray water prior to you branding, or do you just brand it?
I do the water trick, but I still have some overburn sometimes, and I think it's because I get the brand too hot. I start off, I try to brand, and it's too little, so I leave it on for 5-10 minutes, and then it's too hot. So I got to find that sweet amount of time, I guess, the sweet mark distance between the flame and the brand, the time. It's, it's something I'm learning.
I don't do so much time when I'm heating mine up. I actually watch the brass change a little bit of a color. I noticed that it doesn't get red, but it gets like this pinkish, purplish hue. And I just, right before we came on here, I branded 10 flags. So in almost one shot. So I branded about 8 of them. And then the last 2, of course, they were starting to fade. So I had to heat it up a little bit more. But I spray a little water, brand it, and literally seconds on it. And I've gotten to the point where I'm not getting torching. Now, if you spoke to me about a couple weeks ago, mine were like jet black where you couldn't see anything.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a skill you got to learn like anything else. We actually got another question. You want to go ahead and read that one?
Yeah. We got a question that just got sent in from Trails Custom Woodworks on the big old IG. And his question was, what is your go-to tape measure? And I currently use a Stanley 25-foot, and I think it was a 2-pack that I got when I first moved into this house, and they've been just tried and true. I hate to admit this, but they have the little 1/8-inch marks where they actually say 1/8, 3/8. I know how to read a tape measure, but it's nice just to have that little marking on there.
Wait, do you think the tip is broken because it doesn't, hold steady?
Why? That thing's not supposed to move?
Yeah, I glued mine.
Oh, I just ripped mine off. I don't use it anymore. I don't know if you do it, but I always take there's Fast Cap, the company.
Yeah.
They make all different stuff. They have a tape measure that I keep wanting to buy and I just don't, but it's called Burn an Inch, because you know how you use your tape measure, you pull it out, you could put the hook on the end, and measure something. Well, I sometimes like to measure from the inch mark. And let me tell you, I've screwed up so many projects because of that. Because I'm going, oh, it's 20 inches. Meanwhile, it's 19 because I still have an inch hanging over. So I cut it at 20 and go, wow, this thing's big. Why did it come out so big? It's only supposed to be 19. Well, it's because of that. But FastCap actually has one that I might pick up this week where there's, I think, like an inch or two that doesn't have markings on it. So you actually pull it to the inch mark and use that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I had two different ones. I got one in like a tool pack, and then I got a nice Stanley 25-inch I was using. But
25 inch?
25 foot.
That's how many times did you have to keep moving it?
Well, it depends on the day. Yeah. But I just picked up some, was it Crescent? The Shock Force.
Yep.
It comes with the 25 foot and the 16 foot. And it has the night eye on there and a bunch of unique features to it. Better than having one tape measure in the shop. Now, if I misplace one, I can reach for the other. And I've already done the test to make sure that they all measure the same. Because not all measuring tools measure the same. I learned that the hard way. So that's a little tip for you guys. If you're starting off and you're having some issues measuring, go ahead, take your measuring tools, all of them, lay them out, and make sure they measure the exact same. Because you'll find, depending on the brand or depending on the tool, it might not measure the exact same as your tape measure. So now you're cutting and you're marking things differently, and things will come out not quite the way you want them to.
Now, how many tape measures do you have in your shop currently? You said the 2?
Currently, I have 3.
How many times do you lose all 3?
All the time.
Yeah.
But I have them where when I clean, I put them all in the same spot. So if I lose one, I go ahead to that spot. So I have 3 chances essentially to find it or lose them all.
I definitely have to go with something a little bit smaller because, I mean, the 25 foot is good, working around the house or whatnot, doing the projects that I'm doing, but not for in the shop because when am I going 25 feet for a project?
Well, that's where that 25-inch tape measure works so well.
I like it. I might just have to get a 25-inch so then I can do 2-foot flags, a 49-inch for 4-foot flags, and then those will be able to help me. The joke, I'm beating it into the ground at this point.
But
but I definitely have, yeah.
The T-square from Woodpeckers is, I think, was 24-inch?
I got the 30. Oh my God, what did I get? No, I got the 24.
Yeah, we got the same one.
We were at the woodworking show, yeah.
And that thing, that measures great. I love that thing. I use it all the time.
Literally, that saved me from a disaster because I was doing those eagle flags and I measured it completely wrong. And instead of making a flag rectangular, I made this flag almost square for some reason, and I'm not sure why. That T-square came in handy when I had to now draw out where my lines were going to be. I had nothing straight like that. I didn't want to rely on just a straight edge because I would have screwed it up. So that T-square came in handy. I don't have a lot of woodpecker stuff. I have that and a little mini square, and they are some nice tools. But, my Empire squares work just as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, I like woodpecker because I know they're going to be true. They're expensive. Mm-hmm. I don't have all that many of them, but I buy them here and there when they go on sale. We're not engineers, but accuracy matters. And having, good accurate tools that measure, right on point with each other, that will help you get the results that you want. Now, obviously, there's skill and everything involved. That will definitely get you, a step up.
Yeah. And, if you have accurate layout tools, I mean, the little mini square from Woodpeckers, that came in handy when my joiner wasn't at full 90. It was at, I think over 90 or under, I can't remember, but it wasn't dead on. And I literally threw that on there and I saw my inaccuracy right there. And I was wondering, why was my joiner doing this? I thought I had it at 90. Well, I used a cheapo square, and I guess that cheapo square was out. So if you have accurate, layout tools, then they can also be used to check your other woodworking tools, your miter saw, your table saw, you check those for 90, or if you have the square, you could check it for 45 as well.
That's what it comes down to, that's why I have some of the woodpecker tools, because first of all, I didn't have a T-square like that and I saved and waited for that to go on sale. That's why I bought it the day I bought it. And then the same with the rest of the tools I have.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, some tips and tricks. I guess we kind of led into that with the importance of ensuring layout tools measure the same. But we picked up some other tips and tricks from other people on Instagram. What's one of your favorites, man?
Well, one of my favorites is, and this went into a big one with my old miter saw. I made that cutting board, and I did 45-degree miters on the corners, and of course, one of them was gapped real bad. And I was going over different ways on how, I know the sawdust, you take some, mix it in with glue, and then put it in, and then sand it away once it's dry. I was watching Instagram, and I just popped on Daniel Dunlap Woodworks. He goes over on how to do, how to hide like a miter that's not 100%. And you literally put some glue right on the miter while it's wet. You sand it, and then the sanding dust mixes with the glue, and it goes right into the joint. And then this could be applied to small cracks. This could be applied to any kind of gap that you have. But I mean, why did it? I was like, it can't work out that great. That thing worked out flawlessly. I did it on the whole board because I saw little like gaps here and there, and I kept on putting little dabs of glue and sanding. Man, that was the best trick I think I've learned so far.
That definitely is a trick that I use when sadly, I can't have everything be as, tight as I want it to be. Things happen. So you wet it, you sand it, and it just kind of fills itself. It helps seal some of those gaps. Another trick that I picked up from Peter from Petrie Workshop is the brown paper bag trick. Now, this is not a joke. When I first saw it, I thought he was actually, making a joke, but it's something that people do. So a brown paper bag just has enough surface on it to essentially give you a fine sanding, right? And basically, after you finish and you have those little bumps and everything on there, you take that brown paper bag and you just rub it across the surface, and it gets rid of all those bumps. It's crazy. I kind of hesitated doing it my first time. Because the first time I actually asked my neighbor if they had a brown paper bag, and they're like, why? And I'm like, I'm finishing a piece, and they gave me this look of like, whatever, dude. So, but I now finish most of my projects with a brown paper bag because it gives you that silky, smooth feeling on almost every finish.
I use it from the very first coat to the very last. I don't think any of my pieces, unless they're really, really bad, none of my pieces get sandpaper anymore. I'll do a coat, let it dry, brown paper bag, next coat, same thing until my very last one. And it works out great each time.
Yeah, it definitely is something that you should give it a whirl. I mean, like, especially if you're finishing with some poly or any kind of finish like that, and you get that little rough section, it definitely will help you out to get that finish that you want.
So, we're going to start wrapping this up. The ways that you can reach us to send us questions, comments, reviews, tell us that you absolutely love this podcast. You can reach us at Sawdust Nation Podcast on Instagram, sawdustnationpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send it directly to our own DMs. I'm crafted in NJ, and Josh, you are?
North Country Woodworking. Yeah, you can message us anytime. We'll try to get back to you so you can listen. We'll give you a shout out. It's definitely appreciated. And thank you to the 2 people that wrote in this week. We highly appreciate that and all the feedback. Keep listening, and we hope to catch you next episode.
See everybody later.
See ya.